So, welcome to our podcast. I'm James.
And I'm Sophie.
And we are the Christianish family.
And today we are going to be discussing the Sabbath.
Yes, we are. And our understanding of Sabbath, I suppose. I guess, talking about what we understand about the Sabbath over from what we've read from Scripture, and what we've sort of understood over time, what we've learnt together, and also sort of speaking about our own experiences growing up and what I suppose a traditional Christian Sabbath would be considered a Sunday, so what perhaps Sundays look like for us, or whether there were any other sort of traditions or things that we did that we might relate in that same way. And then perhaps a bit of discussion around where we are now.
Yeah, I think that's partly why we decided to talk about the Sabbath in this episode. I don't know if anyone's listened to the previous episode where we talked about how we try and bring our faith into our family. And one of the things that we mentioned was trying to have a separate Sabbath day. And we thought actually that kind of deserves its own episode to kind of dig into. So that's where our decision to talk about it today comes from.
No, absolutely. And then I think finally we probably want to just touch on anything we might want to look to working towards, if there's any particular things more we want to introduce. So so what is our understanding of Sabbath? I guess is a good starting point. How do you see it in your mind?
Well, I think I suppose sort of still being relatively new to the faith, I feel like my understanding in lots of things is sort of still developing. As far as the Sabbath goes, I would kind of initially think about the kind of Jewish Sabbath, and I know a little bit about what Jewish people would do. So I would have that in my mind. As far as the Christian Sabbath goes, however, I think my initial thoughts would be, it's a Sunday, first of all, would be my first kind of.
So why is it
assumption.
A Sunday?
Because that's when the church services are. Basically,
I suppose, obviously, I was brought up as we know in a Christian family, and Sabbath was something that was like drilled into us, and was very, I think I'd just say strict. Really, it was. Sets of rules that were, there were things you just did not do on the Sabbath that you did on the rest of the week, but it was also referred to always as a lot of the time the Lord's Day, and the Lord's Day because obviously that is the day that Christ rose from the dead, hence why the first day of the week, Sunday.
Yeah, you see, even saying like the first day of the week, that's for like a new Christian or relatively new Christian, that's a new concept to me as well. The idea that the Sunday or the Sabbath is the first day of the week.
Well, we've had some interesting debates, in particular with a couple of the children. They're like, no, Sunday's not the first day of the week, it's Monday.
But so that's all that kind of stuff that you sort of have grown up with and take for granted. I'm like, what? Hang on a second. Okay, so your understanding of the Sabbath is probably slightly less superficial than mine.
I don't think I'd call yours superficial. I'm not sure that's the word for it. I think you come to it obviously with a fresh pair of eyes, whereas with the greatest of respect to my parents and my upbringing, I come to it from their traditions that they've had passed down to them. Don't get me wrong, they're deeply rooted in Scripture, but there's things that as I've got older, I think I've seen in a slightly different light, and I wish I'd had clearer teaching on Sabbath as a youngster.
So what is your understanding of the Sabbath then? It's going to be intrinsically linked to how you spent the Sabbath as well, isn't it?
So I think the key thing is about it. You know, in my mind, the key thing is a day set apart, and there are two focuses to that. The first and foremost, and whether we really use it like this, I think is very questionable to its best degree, and I would say probably for a lot of Christians, if we're truly honest with ourselves, it's probably the same. But first and foremost, the Sabbath should be for God. It's for human beings, the pinnacle of his creation, to set time aside to honour him, to worship, to praise, and to have that dedicated time, focused. You know, there should be worship and praise throughout the week as well, but Sunday or Sabbath, for me as a Christian, I see that as a day that's what it should be set aside for. And secondly, it's for us. The New Testament bit of scripture that comes to mind is that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. You know, it was a day that God gave in his loving care over humanity, so that those that were perhaps in, you know, slavery of you know, years gone by, that were, you know, servants and such like, could not be forced to work 7 days a week. They had an opportunity to rest, and that was to everyone, and also to be forced upon those that wanted to keep working. I think there's actually, going off on a slight tangent, but but there have been decent studies that have been done on you know, the effects of not having one day in 7 to rest. So two reasons for the Sabbath: worship God, and for our own rest. Basically, I think I would summarise it as.
I think my another sort of aspect of my understanding of Sabbath was sort of obviously from Genesis, where God creates the world in the 6 days, and then he rests on the 7th day. I think that's another thing I would probably say about my like initial knowledge of the Sabbath, is that the reason that everyone rests is because God created the world, and then on the last day he rested. So that's kind of an example set by him, which is interesting, because that talks about the kind of resting side of it, but it doesn't necessarily talk about the time to worship.
Adoration and worship.
But I suppose that's because it was Genesis and it's mentioned in other parts of the Bible.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because it was only recently that I think someone pointed out that it says that God rested from all his, you know, work that he'd done, and the rest was for God. Not that he needed a rest, though. I mean, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? So at that point, it's sort of almost inferred. God doesn't give any like commandment, or, you know, the only commandment really was that they weren't supposed to be eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they were to look after the garden, to be fruitful and multiply. But there wasn't anything specifically about Sabbath. And a little part of me wonders whether, like, the idea was sort of like it was a paradise, and it was, you know, sort of a Sabbath kind of setting in a way, because they were in communion with God in that early garden, in a sense, which is something I've not really.
Yeah, I was just wondering when it's sort of first mentioned as a thing, because obviously in Genesis it said that, and then God rested, but God doesn't say to Adam and Eve, right, you've got to have a Sabbath day. So it's in Exodus, isn't it, that it comes up?
Yeah, with the 10 Commandments.
Yeah,
I think.
so, and that's where it kind of comes in a little bit more. The only other thing I was just going to say about the Genesis passage was, obviously when God creates the world and he sits back and sees everything as good, and then the humans are very good, that kind of makes me feel that with the Sabbath, or on that last day when he rested, he's resting, but he's also in adoration of his creation. So he's like looking around and thinking how wonderful everything is, and that kind of makes me feel a bit like maybe that's where the adoration comes in for us as well, the fact that it's an opportunity to rest, but it's important to sit and look around and be in awe of the creation.
Be thankful, grateful for everything God's given us and done for us. I think that's a really a really good point. The other thing, I think, just talking about Exodus and the fact that it's sort of instituted there. In my mind, the way it's worded, it seems like there's already an understanding, though, of Sabbath, like this separate day, because it says remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So in my mind, it's kind of the people already had this understanding that there had been this day that was different from all others from the beginning of creation. And God now is in Exodus is, drawing a, so to speak, I suppose, a hard line in the sand, making it black and white. Yes, this day is important. It is a day that I've set aside, and you do need to remember to observe it, along with many other days. But there were various different feasts and things, weren't there? So I think, we could probably have a day's worth of discussion with various bits of research. So what about you then, growing up? Interestingly, as we've already spoken before, you didn't grow up in a Christian home, really, as such, but you still had some sort of quite specific sort of things that you did, and the way like the day was separate for you, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely. But like you said, I don't think any of it came from a faith point of view. I don't know what it was like for my parents growing up, whether they had the day set aside differently for them and they just carried it on. But certainly for me and my siblings and my mum and dad, Sunday was a family day. My dad worked away abroad quite a lot and was often home at weekends, and so Sunday we'd have our Sunday lunch all together, and we made sure that everyone was there. We didn't generally have the television on. We'd listen to music, and I don't ever remember that being like a hard and fast rule, but it was definitely just what we did. I remember being younger and being allowed to choose the CD that we listened to, which is often Andrew Lloyd Webber or Hooked on Classics, because that's just how I roll. Maybe not anymore. So we did set it aside, and it was a family day, and and I also remember watching Songs of Praise in the evening.
Oh, really? Like on a regular weekly basis almost?
But I think I used to really enjoy that as well, actually.
I remember, we never had a telly growing up, and we would sometimes go and stay with my mum's parents who did, and for whatever reason, maybe grandma would stay in and we'd not go out to the Sunday evening service. So that was always the opportunity to put the telly on and watch Songs of Praise. That's my memory, memory of it.
So what about your Sundays though? Because they were sort of a bit more structured, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, I suppose I'm mindful of how I say it, but my general feeling about Sundays growing up was it was a day I probably hated for the most part, because it was just a day that we weren't allowed to do anything that as a kid you wanted to do. So we would generally be out to a morning service, 10:45 start, and in the service for typically an hour and a half. The next sort of main feature of the day would be home and have a roast dinner, which, don't get me wrong, absolutely always love sitting down as a family and enjoying that. And then typically back out in the evening at 6 o'clock, and the next sort of thing I'd be looking forward to would be the end of the Sunday evening service, and we'd quite often go round to my dad's parents, grandpa and grandma, big family home, and sit there and see some of my cousins. Often end up having some sweets and stuff. So that was kind of like probably the highlight of Sunday when I was very young. But we were never allowed to play any games unless they were some sort of religious, Christian kind of game. We'd have colouring books, but they'd be colouring in typically Bible texts. We might have a series of questions to answer from like a little magazine publication, and or read books related to Sunday. So there was this, this idea of being totally separated from the rest of the week, and I think I very much respect that as now as an adult. I think what I struggle with was often what felt like strictness without explanation or understanding as to why we did it. It was just, it's Sunday and that's what we do. And maybe I'm being a little bit unfair to my parents, but I definitely don't really have very I don't have fond memories of Sundays. They were just a day to get out of the way kind of thing. Lots of rules to be followed.
I think that lack of explanation sort of is a bit of a generational thing as well, because I know that partly what we're trying to do with our family at the moment is we're open to discussions. We talk about things, the children have got questions, we try and answer them, blah, blah, blah. But I do think that's, our parents' generation, it wasn't so much
I think you're probably right.
It's just kind of like, well, this is just how it is.
But
it's interesting to hear you say that you hated Sundays, because I really like Sundays, and I really liked the fact that we didn't really watch telly and we had the music on. And, we had the meal, and and so
I wasn't allowed to play with any friends. I had no friends. To
be fair, we didn't really have friends or anyone over on a Sunday anyway. But maybe because mine was less. It was, had the rules there, but they were kind of not so strict, kind of unspoken. I didn't feel too.
No, I mean, I remember, not allowed to kick a football, not allowed to get your bikes out. You'd go for a walk maybe on a Sunday afternoon, but it just all felt a bit restrictive to me growing up.
But this is something that you've carried on though, like throughout your whole life. I mean, my understanding is you've carried on from being a child, moving into being an independent adult, and you've carried on, having Sunday like that.
Very much tried to. Within reason. I think my understanding and appreciation for the Lord's Day, the Sabbath, has changed somewhat, particularly over recent years, and since we've sort of attended a church together. I think I've wanted to try and I think the thing that's changed for me the most is, like, we've met obviously children of a certain age that have lived a different way, and that has forced me in a good way to think more about the purpose of Sabbath. What do I want these children that have not known the kind of upbringing I've had, how would I want them to benefit from this day, rather than it just being, I'm the new guy that's met you, and just say, start
definitely
putting a load of rules in place.
I'm guessing,
and I just didn't feel like the right thing, so it's made me think a lot.
But I'm guessing that when you had your son, you had those conversations and had those thoughts about what is it how do we want our Sundays to be, because he's obviously, I would say that in my mind, he's used to having to go to church every Sunday. He's used to not having the television on. He's used to those things.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
And I think, that's obviously that actually presented quite a lot of challenges, because there were two different viewpoints.
Yeah.
All the time. So yeah, that's.
I think when you have children, it changes it though. Like you were just saying, then we've got together. I had 3 girls. You've got your son, and then we're like, okay, how is this going to be? I remember conversations with you about Sundays, and I remember talking to you about what your Sundays were like. And I was relatively comfortable with it, most of it, because like I said, I've got quite fond memories of Sundays.
Yeah.
The idea of not having the telly on and just having music on, I'm like, actually, that's cool with me, because, we have Christian music on, just to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
So I was okay with that. But then for me, sort of wanting to respect you, and initially I kind of struggled with, okay, well, what do I do then? Because
I remember you
saying, conversations
yeah.
with you, I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to. He's obviously used to having his life a certain way, and he's had these Sundays, and this is what how he's been having his sort of previous married life and what have you. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I come in and not, you're sort of used to things being a certain way, is what I'm saying. And I was like, well, what do I do on a Sunday? Am I allowed to, kind of read? Can I do the washing? Do I just go for a walk? Do we, what do we actually do? And that was more out of wanting to respect you and to really try and be a good wife to you, or, and I think I felt a bit of pressure to kind of, fulfill those expectations for you of what you were expecting me to be like, because I'd never done that before. Where the concept of it made sense, and as I've learned more about the Sabbath myself, but I do think, I guess I kind of was focused more on the resting and what we don't do. Yeah. And I think I was getting a bit of a flap about, well, what do we do then?
Yeah, because I can't just sit here for
or what's allowed, or can I, for example, we've had times when we've had a family barbecue or something, my family will get together on a Sunday. Yeah. They don't think twice about it. They'll get together and go to someone's house and have a barbecue, or it's someone's birthday party, and it's that we have these conversations. And I'm like, if I say no to my family because it's the Sabbath and that's not what we do, it's kind of like they're not gonna
and so these are really sort of interesting points as well, and where I've had to think long and hard about what message am I sending to my new in-laws if I say to them no. They've invited me over for a meal, a barbecue or whatever, and the first things that would come to my mind of years ago is like, oh well, there's going to be popular music playing, which again I was never would have listened to on a Sunday, and topics of conversation, the telly might be on. These were all things that were real worries for me. To some degree, but then I started thinking more about, well, what am I telling people about my religion, my faith, by withdrawing myself? And they're like, well, this is a friendly offer, and I thought, it doesn't really tell, in my mind, the right things about my faith. It actually puts barriers up rather than actually there potentially being opportunity for conversation. We've been out to church this morning, or we heard this or that, and actually normalising sort of our Sunday, the fact that we'll go to church in the morning, or that we might do something different normally, and spending good time with loved ones and family, and just enjoying that, and actually realising this is God's blessing. And it comes back to that scripture of man not being made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man for our benefit.
Yeah, I think you're right, and whenever something like that comes up, we talk about it, don't we? And then we're like, actually, yes, we're going to go because it's family and we want to spend time with them. But I remember you saying to me in the past about like football teams or something. If there was a member of your family who was quite good at football or something, but they couldn't pursue it because the matches were always on a Sunday. So moving forward, if I don't know whether I'm assuming like your son would never have done anything on a Sunday like that. Moving forward now as a family, if our son together wanted to have play football and there were matches on a Sunday, I'm kind of feeling we probably wouldn't necessarily go with that because it's on a Sunday and that's not what we would want.
Yeah, I think making an active choice to do something like that, I know a lot of Christians would differ massively, but I do think it's still really important to do as many things as possible that are good for you, good for us, to set that time aside. Going to football and then putting that priority on training, being at the match, it possibly clashing with church, the pursuit of what really today is another idol.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think sends all the right. However much the children love football, I don't think I'd ever see myself prioritising that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think these are possibly conversations that might come up in the future and that we'll have to have, potentially difficult conversations. I remember our youngest daughter in her primary school was friends with a family who were Mormons, or are Mormons, I should say. And I remember if there was a birthday party on a Sunday, they would just say, it's a Sunday, I'm afraid we can't go.
Same as we would. Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember at the time thinking, wow, that's so cool that you just feel like you can say that. I don't, because not many people are very outspoken about their faith, but they were like, I'm sorry, it's a Sunday, we have that separate. And there was no kind of active horribleness to them about it. So I think that is something, a bridge that we may have to cross.
Yeah.
But I mean, our current Sundays, we try and separate them, don't we? We've been trying to make it different. But
screen time is obviously the big one. So on Sunday we have no screen time. As of about 8:30 in the morning, we collect all the phones in, TV remotes, etc. And there's a curfew in place until 6 in the evening. And then 6 in the evening, people get the phones back, and we say that we can put the big TV on in the lounge. I've normally gone out to chapel, to the evening service, and you might put something on. Yeah, then
some nature program or something. I think moving forward with our Sabbaths, I think we're quite good at the resting and setting it apart and having what we don't do. I think for you and I, potentially making it, well, for me, I'd like to make it a bit more about the whole praising and dwelling and honouring God's side. That's something I'd like to work on a bit more, because I think we read books, we talk to each other we always talk about the sermon, don't we?
And sometimes that stuff flows more regularly, doesn't it, depending on what we've heard. And because we can take up quite a lot of time with preparation again of like a nice roast and sitting down, and I think that's a really important part to enjoy. At the same time, it can feel like it takes over quite a lot of the day, and before I know it, I'm going back out in the evening to the service maybe, and sometimes I would like to have more of that time to sit down, talk to you, or to read. So I think I'm in sort of complete agreement with that's definitely something we'd like to work towards.
Yeah, cool.
So, anyway, I think we'll call it a day there.
Yeah, I think so.
So, thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us again soon for another of the Christianish Family podcasts. I'm James.
I'm Sophie.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.